And joining us now live to discuss today's sentencing for Poway synagogue shooter John Earnest is criminal defense attorney David Shapiro. Thank you, David.
Thanks for having me.
Earnest was sentenced today for federal charges and received a second life sentence. And the defense team argued that some teenagers don't fully develop until they reach their early 20s. He was 19 at the time of the deadly shooting. What do they consider when they're considering that other than age, whether that could be effective?
Well, I mean, you're looking at a couple of things, and I think what the defense was trying to really accomplish today, it was not going to have an effect on the ultimate sentence. His fate was predetermined by the plea agreement that he entered into with the government and a plea agreement he entered into with the district attorney's office. But what they're looking at is the age primarily, and they're looking at socio factors that go into the upbringing, that go into how easily influenced this individual could have been. Because, in California, in the federal system, you look at 18 years old, and who's to say that a 19-year-old isn't more developed or less developed than a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old? So they were just trying to make that point, and I think they were doing it more for where Earnest was going to be housed, whether in California with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation or with the federal system.
His family is pushing for that. They want him in California. What is your take on that? They feel they could have some influence on him if they were able to visit more?
Well, I mean, I think what his defense attorneys were trying to do was to keep him out of the Supermax prison in Colorado, the federal prison in Colorado, where we see people like the Boston Marathon bomber, the shoe bomber, these notorious criminal defendants who've ultimately been convicted and sentenced to lengthy, isolated federal prison terms. I know the family would want him within the California Department of Corrections facility. That way he's guaranteed to be within the state of California. They may have visits with him and they'll have more access. And the argument is that, he has a better chance of sort of redeeming himself, albeit never leaving prison, but to sort of right the wrong as best as he can, knowing the fact that he's going to serve the rest of his natural life in custody.
And Earnest declined to speak today when given the chance. If you were his defense attorney, would you have advised him to apologize to the victims and their families? And if not, why?
Well, what's interesting is he tried to make a statement in September at his state court sentencing. The judge there would not allow him to do so, I think because it wasn't really relevant to what the sentence would be, because he agreed to that sentence as well, the life without the possibility of parole sentence and then some in state court. I would have seriously considered it if I could trust that he would actually say the right thing as it relates to denouncing what he did, denouncing the hate that was in his heart, denouncing what he believed to be the case, where he was going after anybody who didn't look like him. So I would have certainly advised him to consider that. But then again, if there's a concern that he was going to start spewing that propaganda and start talking, the way he was reporting stuff online and the stuff that he was saying, stuff they found in his jail cell, it would have done more harm than good. It wouldn't have affected the sentence, but it certainly could have affected where he serves his time and how easy or how difficult that time would be.
And you've alluded to the fact that it's the plea deal, and the plea deal set out the sentence and that type of thing. But let's look back on the fact that he is a teenager, and when they make these kind of deals for the very same crime, what are the differences when it's committed as a teenager versus an adult?
Well, I mean, he was obviously charged as an adult. He was 19 at the time. So he was charged under the same statute that he would be if he was 19, if he was 29, if he was 39 or 59. I think where it factors in, though, is ultimately, remember, this was a capital case at one point where they were looking into the possibility of the death penalty if he were to be convicted. That's now off the table by way of these plea deals. I think the defense made some strong arguments as it relates to a 19-year-old is not going to appreciate the consequences of their actions as much as someone who's in their late 20s or their 30s, who's been through more of life. But I just wonder whether or not John Earnest was the person to make that argument for. Obviously, they have a job to do. I know that as well as anybody. But, you're not going to find many sympathetic ears given what he has done and certainly his conduct before, during, and after the horrible acts in 2019.
And thank you, criminal defense attorney Dave Shapiro. We appreciate you coming in to speak about this huge development today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.